I made a video a while back on comparing Calico, Cascadia, and Harmonies, and in that video I came to the conclusion that Harmonies is good, but I prefer Cascadia. Then most recently I'd made a video on kind of refining my rating system in hopes of improving the one score catch-all that you see on BGG. One of the things that I found out was when I ranked by category, Harmonies was actually slightly above Cascadia, but in the original comparison video in the comments, Kim was nice enough to suggest Life of Amazonia as a alternative to some of these other games I was comparing. I stored it away a little bit until I started to research for another video where I help you find your next hidden gem. And Life of Amazonia was actually the hidden gem that I found, or potential hidden gem. I guess we'll figure that out by the end of this video. Regardless, Life of Amazonia came up a couple different times, so I reached out to Bad Comet, asked if they'd provide a review copy, which they gladly did, and here we are. We're gonna go over all of the different categories from my previous ranking video, and we're going to rank it up against Harmonies and Calico to see what comes out as the best, I don't know, pattern building, tile building-ish game. But spoiler alert, Life of Amazonia is so much more than that. The first and most important category, one in which I'm weighting at 25% to the total ranking, is mechanics. There's a lot to say about Life of Amazonia mechanics. But in general, like with Cascadia and Harmonies, you're trying to acquire tiles and then place animals on top of those tiles to score points. Acquisition of everything is tied to a marquee mechanic, which is bag building. Each and every turn you're drawing 5 tokens, and those tokens could be a variety of different resources. Those resources are used in different ways. One of those resources is coins. Those coins are used to buy better and better chips that allow you to buy better and better things. And buying is kind of the wrong term because, you know, you're not really buying an animal to come to your land. You're attracting them through resources. But coins, that is an apt description. You're using those coins to buy better tokens, which those tokens are technically resources. Those go into a bag. You draw them 5 at a time, and you are hamstrung by the value on each of those. So as you're going through and purchasing more and more of these tokens, or higher and higher value of these tokens, you're becoming more and more powerful, which leads me to a really big component of this game, which is a power ramping effect. As your bag becomes stronger with better tokens, your power is slowly increasing turn after turn. This reminds me a ton of Quacks of Quedlinburg, where there's not the bust mechanic where you're pulling cherry bombs, but you are pulling tokens, and those tokens, hopefully if you're investing in your bag and building it better and better, you're feeling more powerful and going further on each and every turn, or doing more stuff on each and every turn, similar to filling your cauldron in Quacks of Quedlinburg. Side note, I do think a bust mechanic would be a really fun addition to this game, and actually might help to ramp it a little bit faster, which is foreshadowing to a potential criticism in the future. So what good is building this bag of tokens without things to buy or acquire? And that's related to all the different actions that you have on your turn. So we already talked about purchasing resources. That's one possible action. You can also place terrain tiles, place animals, place aquatic flowers, buy nature cards, expand your storage, or purchase a bonus. Let's go one by one here, and that number 2 option is terrain tiles. When placing a terrain tile, you look towards this wonderful waterfall that's sitting on your board, which is essentially 3 different tracks, and you move your player piece up on that track, pay the cost associated with the spot on the track, take any bonuses that are there, and then place your hex tile. Very much like in Harmonies with its tokens and Cascadia with its hex tiles, you need base terrain to place everything on, and that's what you're essentially doing. There is a lot less of that in this game compared to the other 2, because each of the tiles in Life of Amazonia has 7 hexes on it, so you're filling out that board significantly faster. In fact, I think that's a really big distinction between this and the other 2 games, which is both Harmonies and Cascadia put a premium on building out that terrain, and that terrain and where you place things is directly connected to point scoring. In Life of Amazonia, that's not the case. When you are placing these terrain tiles, you're not directly scoring points. You're trying to orient them in a way in which you can bring animals onto your board and score their points. Speaking of animals, you acquire animals by spending fruit, water, and leaf tokens Each animal has a variable cost, and each animal has a different condition to scoring. This is very much like Harmonies and Cascadia, where each animal likes to be placed in a particular way and you score points. The big difference is a significant amount of your points. In fact, all of the points related to how you're setting your board up are related to how you're placing these animals. It does tie back to how you're placing your tiles because those animals like to live in specific terrain, similar to the other two games. Certain animals like to be next to other animals, different animals, maybe trees. Some animals also like to be next to aquatic flowers. And in scoring, you're going to pick one of a variety of different scoring conditions for each animal. That leads to a little bit of the replayability, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Similar to the hex tiles, the trees also have their track. You also go up on that track, pay the cost associated, get any bonuses that are there, and place the tree. Like I had already mentioned, those trees are connected to individual animal scoring. And the last of those tracks is aquatic flowers. They work very much the same way. Go up on the track, pay the cost, get any bonuses that might be listed, and place the aquatic flower. And they essentially do the same exact thing as trees. Their adjacency help you to score points with your animals. One note and difference here is this track system. Associated with all three of these tracks that I just mentioned are points, and they're really big points. I haven't really mathed out what percentage, but it is a large chunk relative to what you're scoring on your board, so you can't ignore those. In fact, the tracks really make you diversify your approach. They give you incentive to find animals that both need trees and aquatic flowers. In addition to the point values, which are obviously important, there are those bonuses on these tracks, and those bonuses can actually parlay to more actions in your turn. They do things like giving you wild resources, allow you to refresh card markets, which we'll get to, or even draw another token out of your bag. So the order in which you are taking actions is actually important because going up on a particular track might give you that extra resource that you need in order to get the right animal to bring into your terrain. It's a consideration that is completely separated and in addition to something like Cascadia or Harmonies. Another option is to purchase a nature card. These are comprised of insect cards and scenery cards. Scenery cards are in-game bonuses, and insect cards are one-time powerful effects. They're definitely things in which you don't want to ignore and can be completely critical to you winning the game. So that water track and these very powerful cards are vying for that very precious water source, which might lead a player to want to go and acquire better and better water tokens to be able to get more and more of these cards and also go up on those tracks simultaneously. And the last thing you can do is expand your storage. Each turn, like I said, you can only draw 5 tokens. Out of the gates, you can store 1. So you can use 4, put 1 aside, maybe saving for that bigger and better purchase later on. But if you expand the storage all the way, you can hold up to 3. That is a big boon. That certainly helps to close the gap if you're not drawing those really big high-level tokens to buy those big ticket items. You can have a few of the lower level ones just stored off to the side to be able to accomplish that goal. Ultimately, though, this game is about placing life on hexes. Like I'd already mentioned, trees, flowers, and animals. Cascadia obviously has that as you're acquiring hexes and animal tokens each and every turn. Harmonies accomplishes that with the optional draft of those animal cards and then subsequent placement of the cubes. In this case, that placement of animals is the marquee mechanic and thing you're trying to balance. While there's less emphasis on the actual tile placement in this game, the track mechanic, the extra cards you can purchase, and just the dynamic of building your bag makes this so much more than a Harmonies or Cascadia, and really is tough to compare to those other two and is more of an evolution of a game. The next category that I want to talk about is related to fun in a game for me, and it's really how easy does a game get me into flow state. When you enter flow state in a game, time is just flying by. You're fully engrossed in the puzzle you're trying to solve. You're not really hampered at all by somebody taking a long turn, or maybe even ideally in a flow state game, there's simultaneous actions. In Life of Amazonia, this idea of entering flow state is kind of a tough one to conceptualize because there's a slow ramp. That feeling of flow comes really easy in something like Harmonies and Cascadia. The mechanics are super simple. You are just drafting and placing, and you can kind of rinse and repeat really quickly, get into another game really quickly. In this, there's definitely more friction. There's way more in the decision space to consider. You're trying to take into account what's in your bag, and do you need to build it more? Do you want to go get any of those one-time use powers or invest in an in-game goal? Do you need to go up on a particular track to get the particular bonus to parlay that into a bigger turn? There's just so much more to consider. On top of all of that, the dynamic which I had mentioned earlier, which is the slow ramping effect of power, I think, does hamper this feeling of flow and getting into the game. In the beginning of the game where you are so weak, doing so little, it doesn't feel as good. As you go throughout the game, your power increases, and in turn, that feeling of flow increases. By the end of the game, I feel more engrossed and engaged than the beginning of the game, where the other two, it's kind of the same all the way through, if that makes sense. The next category is rules overhead. There's clearly more rules here. I would say it's fairly average for a medium weight game. It's gonna take a couple plays to kind of get up and running, where Harmonies and Cascadia is just so easy to table, so easy to teach to basically anyone. I think accessibility is much better in those two. It's hard to say that this is a negative. It's more of an inform. It's just good to note that there's more rules overhead in this game and probably a little harder to table in result. The next ones are more of the physical appearance of the game. And first is aesthetics. I think aesthetics is great in this game. I would say it's what the art should have been in Arc Nova, where it's realistic. It's not kind of clip art pictures. It's hand-drawn, beautiful imagery, vibrant colors. I think it's better than Cascadia, which is a subjective take, and I think it's different from Harmonies. Harmonies is much more whimsical and unrealistic art. It just depends on what you like. And now it's production. This is sort of complicated with Life of Amazonia. I have the basic retail copy, and in that copy comes that cardboard waterfall, which is clearly unnecessary, but also really cool table presence. Everything else is sort of average components with the exception of the animal meeples. The animal meeples are beautiful. It's the first thing that caught my wife's eye. She saw that and she's like, oh, this is a game for me for sure. And it is. It's definitely up her alley, and especially aesthetically. And those animal meeples add a ton to the game. Similar to Quacks of Quedlinburg, the base tokens get lost in the bag. They're too light. It almost feels silly when I have like 7 tokens in this giant bag and they're all light cardboard. I will say there is a solution to that. They do sell deluxeified components. It's pretty expensive. I will say you'd have to really love this game and this be your type of game. Like my wife said, it is her type of game to necessitate buying those, but there's upgraded components for nearly everything in the game, including a wooden waterfall, similar to the wooden tree in Everdell, which is totally unnecessary, but pretty cool that it exists. Not taking into account any of the deluxeification, the production is pretty similar in all of them. I think there's a bit of a parlor trick in that waterfall and gives you some better table presence, but the thing that is putting it heads and shoulders above Harmonies and Cascadia are those animal meeples. They're absolutely wonderful. So replayability, I think it's fairly average in this game. In general, to me though, swapping up the orientation or how those animals want to be oriented to other things in order to score doesn't do a ton for the game for me. I think Life of Amazonia has a little bit of a leg up in replayability with the nature and insect cards. The insect cards are the one-time powers or effects on the game, and the scenery cards are the in-game bonuses. In addition, Life of Amazonia has unique animal cards. Each player gets a unique animal that they can place on their board, and if they meet certain conditions, it gives them an extra bonus or power. That's nice to have. It's nice to rotate those around. It certainly will add to the variability in the game. I feel like those cards are pretty similar to Nature's Spirit cards in Harmonies, where it gives you a unique starting animal to try to place on your board. All right, so now for the rankings. I give Life of Amazonia a 7.95 for me. That does beat out Harmonies and subsequently Cascadia. And for me, it's really one thing. It's the addition of the mechanics. I really love the bag building. I love the considerations you have to make on the choices, right? It gives the player a lot of choices on what they can do, but then asks them to budget whatever they're pulling out of their bag and whether they want to save some for later. It leads to more interesting decisions for myself. The added rules and setup and kind of overall accessibility keep Harmonies and Cascadia in the collection though. I think they are definitely different enough to have both. I think Life of Amazonia was really looking to evolve past a basic tile builder, animal placement-ish game. It added the tracks, it added the Quacks of Quedlinburg-esque bag building, and it just added some complexity, and I think it did it in a really nice way. And in result, it is my highest ranked tile building game so far on this channel. Most importantly, Kim, you were right. If you've had any experience with any of these games, especially if you've been able to play 2 or 3 of them, I'd love to hear your opinion in the comments. Also, like Kim, if you have any suggestions for me, throw them at me. They may just end up on the channel and you may get famous with a couple hundred people that happen to watch my videos. And if I've provided any value for you, maybe like and subscribe. Other than that, have yourself a great week.